Consensus Network.
I doubt we have another 10 years to wait for hyperbitcoinization, which would imply 3033. I suppose the outer boundary would maybe be in the late 2030 area. Like, I can't imagine if this is a fourth turning, and fourth turnings generally take 20 years, and this one started in 2008. So, 20 years would be 2028. Henry Ford, I'm sure, could not see that we would have highways all over the world and families would have multiple cars. I think that, those of us who kind of look at this thing objectively, realize the benefits it offers, realize the technical innovation it represents. I think we can conclude that, Bitcoin will, in my opinion, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin is going to become the numeraire of money. Now, tomorrow, no. 5 years, unlikely. 5 to 10 years, possible. 10 or 15, I think almost a certainty.
Welcome back to the Freedom Footprint Show, a Bitcoin philosophy show with Knut Svanholm and me, Luke the PseudoFinn. Today, we're joined by investment manager and Bitcoin advocate Lawrence Lepard. We discuss inflation, deflation, the current failures of the banking system, the time frame for hyperbitcoinization, the ossification of Bitcoin, and much more. Will Bitcoin save the world? Do you need to get in now? Let's talk about it. But before we dive in, we'd like to quickly remind you that the best way to support the show is to send us a boost or stream us some sats using a value for value podcasting app such as Fountain. If you're listening to the show as a podcast, check out Fountain if you haven't already. You can earn sats from listening to podcasts, and you can support your favorite shows through value for value. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe to the Consensus Network channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And finally, we want to thank today's sponsors, Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, and BitcoinBook.shop. All their information is in the description, and we'll be talking a little bit more about them later. And now, without further ado, here is Lawrence Lepard on the Freedom Footprint Show. Lawrence, welcome to the Freedom Footprint Show. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, most welcome. I'm happy to be here and see my good friend Knut.
Good to see you, Larry. My favorite Bitcoin boomer.
Yeah, right. Oh, no, come on. Don't tell Foss that. I appreciate it. Two of us.
Yeah. Foss is my other favorite Bitcoin boomer.
Okay, good.
But he's on, what do you call it? A penalty in hockey when you're out?
Yeah, he's in the penalty box for messing with Udi.
Yeah. So he's in the penalty box for a couple of minutes now, but he'll be back soon, I guess.
Yes. You don't want to mess with Udi.
No, we talked a bit about messing with shitcoiners, and I think we both agree that the best way to tackle shitcoiners is just to ignore them.
Absolutely.
Because they thrive on attention. That's what fuels
exactly
them.
Right.
So don't give them attention. Don't retweet.
Don't give them oxygen. There's no point. Okay?
No, exactly. No matter how stupid their tweets are, don't retweet them.
Yes, absolutely on that. Yeah. Yeah, there are a bunch of people on Twitter that I put into that box, and I don't block them, but I generally mute them.
I feel they use the same tactics as some politicians. I would say Trump falls into that camp of saying stuff that is so stupid, so people get upset, and then they retweet it, and it worked for him.
No, I think these people view it as any publicity is good publicity, and so they definitely try to trigger people.
Exactly.
My rule is I try to avoid being triggered. Sometimes they get me, but
yeah. And on the other side of the political eye, people like AOC that does the same thing, saying that the world will be destroyed in 4 years and stuff. Yeah. Like it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a sad development because that was not the case pre-internet, right?
I think that's right. I mean,
not to the same extent, at least.
Yeah, I think in general, the internet and instant communication has brought a lot of good to the world in terms of decentralizing things. I mean, the New York Times no longer controls the narratives, and, Joe Rogan, a lot of other people get to weigh in, and we all get to weigh in. But I like the negative is that free speech is also messy. You get a lot of people saying stupid stuff, and you got to sort through it all, right?
Yeah.
And also you have internet frauds. I mean, I've on many tweets, things I thought were correct, I've retweeted them only to find out that what's being said was just plain outright a lie or a fraud or wrong, right?
I know. And whenever I do that by mistake, I delete it as soon as possible.
Oh, me too. This is what he points it out. But I mean, I have to admit, sometimes I get sucked in. I'm like, oh, wow, that's really bad.
Exactly.
I discover that's not even true. I can't
know. And sometimes you even retweet a parody account because you think it's a real thing and it's just a parody.
No, it's tricky. I mean, knowing what's real and what's not is not simple, especially when you've got people with avatars and stuff. I mean, on Twitter, at least, I mean, I get criticized. All these people won't even show the real name. I mean, I'm out there with my real name taking risks,
Yeah. Having said all that, like, I'm still very much pro as much free speech as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And let us all sort it out. I mean, generally speaking, once people start, abusing the privilege, they get turned off pretty quick. I mean, the mute button is a great thing on Twitter.
Yeah. And the market takes care of that by itself. And even the social networks take care of that by themselves pretty good as well, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we recently met in Miami for a short period of time. Hung out in the lounge for a while. And before that, we met in Madeira. It was like almost a year ago now since we did our little Madeira trip.
I know it. I've heard there's a possibility of another Madeira meetup or even a small show over there at some point next year. I don't know if you're aware of that or if that's coming together. You'd know more than I would, right?
I may or may not know a lot about that.
You can't disclose it.
Yes. But let's just say, don't book too much stuff early March next year.
Well, I would love to return to Madeira and take my wife this time because she wants to see it. And what a beautiful little island. Of course, Portugal is hard to beat in any respect. So
yeah, but Madeira is very special, don't you think?
It's very much so.
A literal paradise on earth.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I know you were thinking of moving there. Is that something that's happened, or are you going in that direction?
No, we're still in Spain, and so we're staying here for the foreseeable future. And but I have a good excuse to go to Madeira a couple of times per year. So I try to do that whenever I can. Now I'm traveling quite a lot, going to a lot of conferences this year. So I was on Madeira in February this year, I believe, and we had another meeting with Miguel. That was fine. Yeah.
Sure.
There's not a lot in the news, but there are things happening in the background and behind the curtains all the time. So I'm very bullish on Madeira.
Yeah, that's great. Well, look, I mean, I know we were trying to orange pill the entire island, and I know that, guys were renting surf equipment from a guy they'd orange pilled. So, the more we can do that, the better, right?
Absolutely. And what's your favorite way of orange pilling a person? Like how do you approach this?
Yeah. So, well, I generally start, if they're a real normie, I generally start with just a discussion about inflation. And, because pretty much everybody in the world is now aware of the terrible inflation that we're all suffering through. And so that's always a good place to start. And then, of course, I lead into Bitcoin fixes this, and they're kind of like, Bitcoin, how, why, whatever. And I take them to down the rabbit hole of the 21 million and fixed and deflationary and more efficient, and a little bit of Keynesianism and how it's broken. And then, but the other thing that I find is just a useful, concrete step. I think you probably do this too, is I have a Moon wallet on my phone. And I just say, hey, I'm going to send you a couple $, and it's going to cost me less than a penny to do it. And this is how simple it is to use. I mean, and most, of course, these people don't have any Bitcoin. They've never thought of having any Bitcoin. And so I say, get out your phone, go to the App Store, download Moon, MUUN, as you know. Great. Enter a passcode, fine, hit receive. Let me take a picture of that lightning code. Here's $2 or $1. And they're kind of stunned and like, wow, that's easy. I said, there's your first Bitcoin. Don't spend it. Don't use it. Get more of it. That's kind of the approach I take. And I think a lot of people are intrigued by it. I've given away, hundreds of dollars, $1 at a time to people who, if they express any interest, unless they're very hostile against it, generally they'll accept it.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I used to do Moon, but I prefer Wallet of Satoshi now for a couple of reasons.
That's good too. Yeah. I have that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good for beginners thing.
Yeah.
So about inflation and deflation, where do you see this? the way I see it, the official numbers for almost every country in the world right now is 10% inflation. But as we know, they don't add like the cost of apartments and villas into those bags of stuff that they calculate inflation from or pretend to calculate it. So it's more like 20% in every country, right?
It can be, yeah.
And so where do you see that going? Is this the big one, or is this where everything crashes, or do we have another 20 years to wait?
Well, I don't think we have 20 years to wait. We spent a lot of time debating this, and I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by smart people and read other smart people who have views on it. And I don't think any of us really know. I doubt we have another 10 years to wait for hyperbitcoinization, which would imply 3033. I suppose the outer boundary would maybe be in the late 2030 area. Like, I can't imagine if this is a fourth turning, and fourth turnings generally take 20 years, and this one started in 2008. So, 20 years would be 2028. In terms of the shorter term zigzags, obviously we had an enormous inflationary boost with the CARES Act and PPP and all the COVID stuff and all the money printing, growth money supply 40% in 2 years from, 2020 to 2022. And that, that's what lit Bitcoin on fire, lit gold on fire to a smaller degree. And then, of course, the authorities, Powell, et cetera, reacted with, oh my God, first it was transitory, but then they admitted it was real. And they said, we're going to slam on the brakes. And I've often said that what's going on here is these monetary authorities are like, they're driving a clown car on icy roads where they've got two guardrails. One of them's inflation, one of them's deflation. And they kind of keep bouncing off these two rails. And so, we had massive inflation. And now they've slammed on the brakes hard. They did one of the tightest fastest rate hiking cycles ever in the history of finance, although there was a tight one in the 70s as well. And, the money supply growth has gone negative for the first time in, 20, 30 years. And if it continues to go negative, it's going to look like the Great Depression. So we're going to have a deflationary collapse. And my sense is they're going to try and do that. And, that's a possibility in a shorter run basis. In order to get inflation under control, because they view it as an existential threat. However, eventually that's going to become a bigger problem, and the inflation prints will come down a little bit. The economy will be rolling over. There'll be a lot of unemployment. Things will be breaking, and we've already seen things breaking. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank's an example of that. The other banks that failed, and they'll have to reverse course. And of course, when they do that, we're going to go screaming in the other direction in this clown car of, I think arguably forward hyperinflation. They probably have a couple more cycles left in them. But my sense is that they've kind of lost control of both the narrative, the money supply, and the inflation deflation thing that they thought, quote unquote, they had under control. And I think it's important to understand, in my opinion, that we had 40 years of deflation. And as Jeff points out so intelligently in his book, and we all know from technology and watching technology, we live in a deflationary world in many respects. I mean, productivity enhancements lead to getting more for less over time. And yet we've got a monetary system that's constructed upon the basis that you must have inflation. If you don't have inflation, you can't pay your debts and the system collapses. So this is quite a paradox, as you and I both know. And as a result of that paradox, the old thinkers who grew up in the Keynesian world, grew up in the post-World War II monetary world, continue to try and solve the problem with old thinking, and they can't, because they just can't. They're trapped, and the old thinking is not going to work. They need new thinking, which is to say they've got to go to a sound monetary standard. Of course, the most superior, which is Bitcoin. And then the monetary standard needs to track along with what's going on in the economy, which is we're getting more and more productive. And so in theory and in practice, things will always be deflationary. And as your book so correctly points out, a view that I've talked many times about, the price of everything is going down in Bitcoin terms. I mean, just forever. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it really is mind blowing when you start thinking in those terms again, because day to day, it's hard to remember someday that's where we're going, and it's very hopeful. Right. So yeah, they're fighting fire with fire, basically.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, if your lens is looking at 1 day or 1 hour or 1 week or 1 month or 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. I mean, remember this invention is 14 years old, and if you're back in the beginning, you get it for $1 or less, and now it's $30,000, and we keep having higher highs and higher lows, and as I think you and I both agree, we're going to see hundreds of thousands per coin, and then someday we're going to see millions of dollars per coin, and the difficulty is obviously being patient and understanding the swings, and not plop buying at 68, although I was still buying at 68. I was dollar cost averaging. And I continue the dollar cost average all the way down to 15 and back up to 30. And I think, we all know it's volatile. That's just part of the adoption curve. We're still very, very early. I mean, there are 8 billion people on this planet. And I don't know, we can all debate what percentage know about or own Bitcoin, but it's pretty damn small. And,
absolutely. Yeah. My favorite example, speaking about how deflation does not just deter consumption completely, is computers and the computing power. And
right.
Moore's law is still happening on a fiat standard. So computers are deflationary as hell, and we still buy new ones all the time, and new cars and everything. So that's all a mirage and an excuse for
the whole notion that you have to have inflation to create animal spirits, that if you have deflation, nobody will spend any money, and therefore the economy won't exist. That's crazy. Yeah. What, people are going to stop eating? They're going to stop driving cars? They're going to stop wanting housing? I mean, people have natural human needs, whether it's inflationary or deflationary out there.
Yeah. Would you agree that what you would get rid of is, the excess spending and luxury goods and consumerist bullshit? Like, is that maybe not luxury goods?
I think when people feel like they have a way to save their money and their capital, knowing that it's not going to depreciate, as you and I have discussed, as everyone in Bitcoin has discussed, their time preference shifts, and they start thinking, this is a really good thing. Do I really need to spend that extra X dollars or Satoshis on that widget? Because I know if I don't, those Satoshis are going to be worth a lot more in the future. And so you're much more intentional in what you spend your money on. And so you just start thinking to yourself, do I really need that extra doodad piece of crap?
No.
Or would I rather have that in my savings account and growing? Now, you might be really hungry and you might say, hey, you know what? I really need that steak, and I'll pay for that steak because it's going to give me some good nourishment right now. But, you don't necessarily need the second or the fifth steak or whatever it might be. I mean, that steak is never really a piece of crap. But I guess the point is, people spend a lot of money on a lot of stupid stuff like shiny cars and, expensive clothes and so on and so forth. And I think when you start realizing that you can save your money and have it be worth a lot more in the future, you ask yourself with every purchase, is this something I really want and need? Man, look, if it's a great experience, if it's to travel to Madeira, sure, I'll spend the money because it's a fabulous experience. But stuff, you tend to want less stuff.
Yeah. If it's a fifth steak, I'll still take it over a fourth turning, though.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I mean, yeah.
So do you think Bitcoin can save us from, or us, save the world from the impeding financial crash? To what extent do you think that? How will that play out? I know these are extremely hard questions that are hard to foresee. But what's it like? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the next 10 years in that sense?
Well, I try to be realistic and both. The answer is really both. I mean, I'm very optimistic on where we're heading and how much better we'll be. I'm incredibly positive. I mean, I shared Jeff Booth's excitement for the better world that is coming our way as a result of these old ways of doing things kind of falling by the wayside. I mean, there's so many good analogies, but, think about how much better the world got when automobiles replaced horses or something. I mean, I'm very, very positive on where we're going, but I'm also realistic enough to know that to get from an entrenched system with a lot of vested players who are going to throw, sand in our eyes and try to discourage us from going there, that, there's going to be pain. And certainly there's going to be more pain, I think, felt by the people who don't recognize the trend we're going in. I mean, if you want to hang around and hang on to your bonds and hope that in 30 years, your bond portfolio is going to be giving you a good real income, I think you're going to be, sadly and rather poorly treated economically, as opposed to if you want to take that bond money and put it into Bitcoin, and watch it continually appreciate in terms of its purchasing power in the future. Because as we know, Greg Foss points out, my good friend, but fiat is really just programmed to debase, and it will always debase. The question is just at what rate. And I think at some point, as I think Preston Fish does the best job of talking about this, you get an engineering kind of phase state change where, at 28 degrees, water is ice, but at 34 or 38, water is water. And at some point, people are going to abandon fiat. I mean, they're just going to go, holy shit, this stuff, it's just they're printing so much of it so fast, it's never going to hold its value. It'll be a crack up boom. It'll be like what we saw in Weimar, where anyone who gets paid in fiat will instantly move to convert it into something that's sounder, and that's of course hyperbitcoinization. And I think that is coming, but we're definitely several swings away from that. We're not even close to being at that point. In fact, the network and the supporting companies couldn't even handle it if it happened today. So that's probably a good thing, but that's where we are ultimately going. I mean, just as, Henry Ford, I'm sure, could not see that we would have highways all over the world and families would have multiple cars. I think that those of us who kind of look at this thing objectively realize the benefits it offers, realize the technical innovation it represents. I think we can conclude that, Bitcoin will, in my opinion, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin is going to become the numeraire of money. Now, tomorrow, no. 5 years, unlikely. 5 to 10 years, possible. 10 or 15, I think almost a certainty. So what does that put us into the late 2030s kind of thing? And it's hard to know the slope. I mean, I watch these phase state changes, like, Russia was pretty big and powerful, and then one day it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? I mean, things can and do happen in a very, sometimes rather quickly and quicker than anyone would expect. And one thing people have pointed out, I think is an interesting observation, is that, we live in a digital world. We live in an instant communication world. Here you are, in Europe, speaking to me in the United States, real time. We can see each other. The Silicon Valley Bank, when it failed, I mean, this kind of blew my mind. In one day, they had $42 billion of withdrawal requests from the Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, talk about a bank run, right? And this is not Bailey Savings and Loan, right? I mean, and I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that the next day they had $100 billion in requests. They shut down. They were, the FDIC seized it. But I mean, the bank had $200 billion of deposits. So in 2 days, that bank went from being okay or kind of being alive to being, functionally bankrupt. And so, when the similar kind of thing, I mean, if Silicon Valley Bank is a microcosm for the United States Treasury, which one could argue it kind of is. I mean, obviously it's more obvious and worse today, but I think the Treasury is headed in that direction. At one point in time, everyone could kind of say, hey, we don't want this stuff anymore. We're out of here. These Treasury bonds sold to you. Give me that sound thing. Give me that real estate. Give me that food. Give me that commodity. Give me oil. Give me gold. Give me silver. Give me Bitcoin. I mean, anything that can't be printed by the government, because people will have totally lost confidence in the government.
Today's show is brought to you by our sponsors. First up, Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats, meet like-minded Bitcoiners near you, and help speed up hyperbitcoinization with Orange Pill app. Bitcoin isn't an online-only phenomenon, and Orange Pill app helps facilitate the social layer, connecting Bitcoiners in their local area. It maintains your privacy through the whole process, and since you have to pay to access the app, you know that everyone there cares about Bitcoin and is high signal. A great new feature is events. You can create events and meetups right from the Orange Pill app and help build your local community while maintaining the Bitcoin-only signal. Orange Pill app is available on iOS and Android. Download now. Next up, Wasabi Wallet, an open-source, non-custodial desktop wallet that is trustless, easy to use, and affordable. It has CoinJoin built in to facilitate your privacy, Every Bitcoin transaction leaves a clear footprint, but with Wasabi, you can make sure that others can't track your steps and threaten your sovereignty. Just send your coins to Wasabi wallet, wait, and your coins will be private on the other end. It's open source, trustless by design, and non-custodial. You have full control over your keys. Check it out now at wasabiwallet.io.
Robert Kennedy talked about Bitcoin being democracy money in Miami. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't like politicians. And he's a politician. So I'll start right there. So I'm not, anybody who wasn't, and I know there's some real dirt in his background. I know what it is and I get it. But I do, the way I evaluate politicians is I do praise them when they say things that I agree with. And there are many things he's saying, which I do agree with very strongly. He understands. I mean, if you remember from his speech down there, he explained that the way he got into this, the reason he became aware of Bitcoin and supported Bitcoin was the Canadian trucker strike. And he saw what the government did there to try to seize the GoFundMe accounts of these truckers. I mean, these people were peacefully protesting policies that they thought were not correct. And the government said, sorry, we're taking your money. And obviously Bitcoin was a workaround, and he saw that, and he intelligently realized what a nice, system the Bitcoin system is for avoiding the financial repression of these governments. And so, my comments are hats off to you, Robert. I mean, and, will he win the presidency? Probably not, very unlikely, but here we have a guy with a really big name, with a following, with an audience to some degree, although the mainstream has really tried to shut him down, who's out there talking about something that is very important to me and to you and to all of us in this community, which is freedom of speech as expressed through Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. The thing is, though, that Bitcoin is not really democracy money, is it? It's anarchy money. Like it's
well, that's a good point. Actually.
So
you might have mislabeled it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if it is democracy money, and if they, as in the politicians, can dictate what a node is and what you're allowed to do with it or not, or we are allowing you to run the node, then Bitcoin is at risk. Very much so. There is a good argument to be made for that politicians that are hostile to Bitcoin are actually better for the network, because that forces people to actually take full custody and run their own nodes and choose their own software and fight the real fight here. Because I like that. I think his labeling democracy money. I mean, look, he's not as sophisticated as the rest of it. I get it. And the thing, I did a Twitter poll about that. What's better for Bitcoin? Like politicians who are for it, politicians who are against it, or Honey Badger don't give a fuck. And option C is obviously the correct one in the long run, at least.
That's right. I mean, Honey Badger really doesn't give a fuck. And look, whether they're for it or against it, they really can't stop it. And that's what's so fabulous about it. I mean, I was fortunate enough to hear Saylor talking in a small group setting in Miami, where he said, the only way this thing can get screwed up is if the core developers screw it up, and so he has a very strong opinion that we need to, we've got it fixed. It's working well. We shouldn't be messing with it. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I was on the stage with a guy over in England when I was meeting with McCormick, and this guy was saying he thought that maybe the 21 million cap should be adjusted to grow 2% a year. Man, I just about fell at him. I wanted to go over and slug him. You know what I mean? He's attacking. I did, because you just, that's the core value proposition. And so, that, or messing with the block size, or some of the other proposals that have been made, I think are very dangerous. I mean, the only way we can mess this up is if we do it ourselves.
Exactly. It's just like the only way you can mess up your own keys is that you do it, like that you put them at risk somehow. Even from attackers. If the attackers can get to your private key, then you're not doing Bitcoin security properly.
Correct.
And you're not using your imagination in the imaginative enough ways. I view this as the biggest risk factors as well. And Bitcoin will ossify at some point and never change. And that's sort of why I believe it.
I think we're probably close to being there. I mean, I'm sure, we both lived through the fork wars, and, this whole Taproot thing is a little bit disturbing. I mean,
it is.
I would like to see it ossify. Whenever anybody, I think as Bitcoiners, we should be relatively loud about our views that, don't mess with it. It's not broken.
No, exactly.
Don't mess with it.
Exactly. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. What's the American expression?
Right. And of course, the implication, it's interesting. I got on the spaces talking about this, and, some of the techies on there were like, well, no, it's a limited size block, and therefore there's a limited number of transactions, and there are billions of transactions in the world. And how's that going to work? You're going to get to the point where the on-chain fees are going to be $10,000 a transaction. I'm like, yep. And that's okay.
Exactly.
That's actually okay, because that'll be a transaction between people who have hundreds of billions of dollars, and they'll gladly pay it. And, that's why we have a layer 2 and a layer 3, and all of that. Right.
And like off-chain scaling, that's the thing. I don't even like the term layer 2. Like I like if I barter a book with another Bitcoin author at a conference, I am to a certain extent using Bitcoin, right?
Right.
Or I'm using Bitcoin in the sense that I'm avoiding third-party involvement in my transactions.
Correct.
And it's a lame example, I know, but no, still,
it's a great example. It's a perfect example. Yeah.
The thing that's lacking is imagination of how to scale this outside of the chain. Like how can we build stuff that are somewhat connected to Bitcoin, but as long as people know the trade-offs and it's open source, and then that's how we have to scale.
I'm sure you're aware of it because he was with us in Madeira. I mean, I think, Obi and Fediment really is a perfect example of how that's going to work. I mean, look, everything, I think ultimately everything will be priced in Satoshis, right? So, stake will cost, I don't know, X 100 a Satoshi. I mean, especially a stake might cost 20 Satoshis, but whatever.
21.
20, yeah. But the point is, if everything's priced in Satoshis, you don't necessarily need to do an on-chain transaction, to move from A to B. All you need to do is have a secure place to store Satoshis and know that place is linked back to the original chain. And so that if it ever got into a deficit, it would go, the deficit would be filled, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's a Fediment, and that's a lightning network, self-custodying your Satoshis and allowing you to transact, right?
Yeah. And with people you trust, like you can do completely off-chain transactions that aren't even on the Lightning network. You can just keep track of. This is the thing about money that people don't seem to get. Like, money solves the problem of not trusting who you're trading with. If you're trusting the person you're trading with, like you trust your family, no money is needed. Like within a family, we never use money, but when we trade with one another. Like, I cook you food and you do something for me that's pleasant. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's the very problem that money solves. And that's why KYC, it's such bullshit, because it's counter to the very purpose of money.
Correct. That's correct.
And that is the thing. I think I talk about this a lot, and I get a lot of flack for it because people think I'm bonkers when I talk about, transaction. The real scaling solution is how the total number of transactions will go down and not up. But this is what I think. Like the innovations will be in how people use their imagination to do trade outside of the actual chain. Because it enables trust between us. When you have trust in the base layer, very, very base layer of society, it's much easier to weed out the bad actors. So, I would trust you with $50 million. I wouldn't trust Udi with $50 million. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No disrespect, Udi. I'm just saying. Like,
I think you did mean disrespect. Come on.
But here's the thing. I don't think Udi's going to be listening to this, so we're good.
All right. So anyway, that's the future I predict, where people it will be easier to detect honesty, and therefore easier to detect dishonesty in people.
Well, that's correct.
Also, through this, that we have this video conferencing and social media is so powerful. It's much, much more powerful than people think it is. Like, everyone that was a crypto boy last year is talking about AI now, but this, human interactions between continents, like, sooner or later, everyone will figure out the borders are bullshit, like, because they are.
Well, that's right. And who needs these governments? And you know, I don't want to kill anybody in China or anybody in Russia or anybody in the,
No,
I mean, it's like everyone's going to just want to live peacefully. And I mean, what we're going to watch, in my opinion, is the decentralization and the breaking down of the nation states. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, there's a lot of really, really great stuff coming our way.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it gets interesting though. I mean, it's money, but I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to the most recent Sailor pod on what is money with Breedlove, or the most recent Jason Lowry pod on what is money, but I highly recommend both.
I listened to both on McCormack and not Breedlove.
But aren't they interesting? Isn't it interesting that, that at the next layer up, Bitcoin not only becomes money, but it also becomes a truth machine. I mean, it's the only thing that you absolutely mathematically know to be true in the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's the most powerful computer network in the world. And implications of that, I have a hard time wrapping my head around it, but it's really interesting. And I don't think any of us fully understand how far that's going to take us. Because one of the things about AI that scares me, as Sailor points out, I mean, somebody's going to be able to, you've already seen, I've seen it online. You see people who, like some guy has got an AI version of Jerome Powell's voice. And some AI robot listened to Jerome Powell enough. And so this guy can type in a speech for Jerome Powell. He can give it. It sounds just like it.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, what if your kids, what if some AI thing, matches your voice and then they, or matches your kid's voice and then calls you up and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm in trouble. Send me money." I mean, there's going to be all kinds of computer security and fraud is kind of the next frontier of warfare, as Jason points out. I think he's right.
But still have to remember that when the cinema was a new thing, like the first movie that was ever shown in a cinema, there was a black and white train coming towards the audience, and they all panicked and ran out. It's sort of a similar situation now. We have this thing and we think it's scary, but is it really that scary? Like, we'll see. I don't have the answer to that, but yeah.
No, I agree.
The thing I disagree with about this absolute truthfulness layer thing, slightly from a lot of other Bitcoiners, is that is only true for the monetary aspect of it. Like any document you attach to the blockchain or the time chain or any other thing you attach to it, you rely on, whoever is uploading it to not have meddled with it in the first place. So it does not prove anything except that you did that at that point. It does not prove anything about the validity of the document.
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's also one thing called open timestamps, which has been around for quite a while, which means that you can connect any document to a certain block height in the time chain. So you can sort of timestamp a document by making a hash of of the document. It doesn't take up as much space as doing like the ordinals thing or whatever other. Yeah. So that whole narrative, it reminds me of what people were talking about back in like even 2016. There were sort of, this stuff about colored coins and stuff about other use cases for the time chain. And to me, that's noise, because that is not what secures. The security model is only works internally and never externally.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So I'd rather, instead of putting my will on the time chain, I'd rather just keep the 12 words and keep the Satoshis and just give them to my heirs.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. I agree with that. I mean, look, the monetary case is the first and best use case, and it's huge, and it's going to change the world.
It's going to dwarf the other use cases, I think.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing though is that in a world where your identity could be questioned, if you have the 12 words, you have them memorized, nobody else has them, you can really prove it's you. Do you know what I mean? And that sounds ridiculous that would even be a question right now, but I think someday that could become a question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know. And like, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how this will play out.
None of us do.
But
it's hard to see how it's going to play out, right?
I sort of see, you're a gold guy. So I see the other use cases for the time chain as like the industrial use cases for gold and the jewelry use cases for gold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
The reason that you make jewelry out of gold is not gold is not valuable because jewelry is nice. Like it's the other way around. You make jewelry out of gold because gold is valuable, right? Because it has a monetary value. So the monetary value sort of eats up. That's the lion's share of the value.
That's the reason we pull it out of the ground, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the other, and as was it Hayek that pointed out that other use cases actually make it a worse form of money because you sort of tamper with its purity. That's how I view everything on the time chain that isn't just pure Satoshis. That's the analogy I can think of at this point. I'm going to refine the thoughts a bit.
Yeah, Jason would probably come and argue with you because he's absolutely convinced it's a national security issue. Jameson Lopp wrote a pretty good counter article to Jason's arguments. Did he? Okay.
He leaves out the sort of quote unquote debunking of it is that Jason he views mining as the only thing that secures the network, which is simply not true. Like the security of a network is a combination of a lot of things that all stem from voluntary human action.
The nodes, for example.
Yeah, and the nodes, and even the people interacting with the node runners. Like, so I like the arguments of Mises and Rothbard that there is no such thing as a circular economy. Like everything's connected. So if I run a node in my home and I'm under pressure from other people to do something with the node to run a different piece of code, like I get influenced by everyone else I interact with. There's no like separation here. So that's, and I think that part of it is at least, not emphasized enough in this sort of new ideas about how to think about Bitcoin. And it's the same with, hashing power being so important. The way I see it, the cost of hashing power is what secures the network and not the hashing power itself. What the hashing power is good for, though, is for making the internal clock work. So the difficulty adjustment and because the internal clock is crucial to prevent the double spending. So that's the point of the hashing power.
Yes.
Anyway.
I mean, and all of these guys, and it's taken me a while to really see this, but like everyone is finally coming around to understand that energy really is nature's natural discount rate, right? I mean, just energy and power is what we all strive for, and it's what it provides, the lifestyles we have, provides everything. And it ought to, by its very nature, money ought to be tied to energy. And Bitcoin is the purest form of that, right?
Yeah, it's the first time we could directly convert energy into a piece of the world's
and not the first time, because if you think about it, mining gold, I mean, money was before Bitcoin, gold was money.
Yeah.
And mining gold literally was an expenditure of energy. You had to break rocks and spend money on explosives and diesel, and you ended up with money. So there was a tie. I mean, the other thing, I'm fascinated by all the charts that Steve Sirocco and Luke Groman and a lot of others have done really great work with it, kind of looking at how oil and money have been tied over the years and how they haven't really varied that much. I mean, the dollar has lost a lot of its value. But if you actually price oil, in gold, I mean, the price of oil has actually stayed relatively constant over long periods of time.
Yeah. It's the stock to flow ratio thing. And
exactly.
The thing that makes Bitcoin so special, though, is that we know it's absolutely finite and we know what the cap is.
Correct.
And that makes it completely different from oil and even gold in my mind.
To being comparable to gold. Yeah. And I mean, and I say that a lot, and that's why I don't think any of us really even fully understand it. And I sit in amazement of the whole thing. I mean, there is no other commodity in the world that if you double, triple, quadruple its price, you won't get more of. You push up the price of coal or oil or corn or gold, doesn't matter what it is. If you push the price up high, we're going to make more of it. There's never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin. That's the power, and no matter how high the price is. And so the power, I think a lot of people they have a hard time getting their head around that. But once you do get your head around that, you'll say to yourself, holy shit, I got to own a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like discovering a time machine or something. It's like, holy shit, this exists. How can this be? Like, It's almost too good to be true.
Yeah, it does seem too good to be true. And yet I sit and look at it. And, I think you and I had this discussion with Madeira. I mean, in the early days, my great fear was just it's a computer, it could blow up. but I now have gotten beyond that. And I feel, in fact, when we were talking about all the physics we were talking about, I feel like the thing is pretty battle tested, and the odds of, massive computer failure in this thing are pretty damn low. I hope you agree with me on that.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you coordinate a massive computer failure over continents? That would be like an EMP wave from the sun or something. And the only thing
probably right. Yeah.
The only thing that really happens is that you halt the system for the next block will take longer than 10 minutes, but that's the only problem.
Yeah, right. Which wouldn't be the end of the world. Yeah, if everybody had. Yeah.
I don't know. Is there someone printing, like physically printing the blockchain somewhere, like on paper?
I don't know.
That could be
I'm sure
pretty cool thing.
Somebody is, but I mean, what's the node count up to? Is it like 15 or 20,000 nodes right now?
Yeah,
Maybe
something like that, right? I know it was 10,000 a couple of years back, but I haven't checked.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Maybe there's a statistic on Clark Moody or something, one of those websites that are so great for that. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is about companies and governments owning Bitcoin. Is that really a thing? Because the way I see, let me lay this out for you first. Like, Bitcoin is so personal. Like, all owning a Bitcoin is keeping a secret.
Yes,
and only a human brain can keep a secret. Like, there's nothing else can really keep a secret. It's
right.
At least not at this point. So, a government owning Bitcoin makes absolutely no sense to me, because it's not really the government owning the Bitcoin. It's some guy or a group of guys. Like, maybe Fedimint solves this to a certain degree, but still, actually holding the Bitcoin and not just holding paper Bitcoin is way trickier than your average politician could handle.
It's a brilliant question, and I mean it got me thinking. I mean, like, so let's say the U.S. government decided owning Bitcoin was part of its strategic plan, right? And so we started owning Bitcoin. I mean, you'd have to have a system that's probably similar to the nuclear code system to protect that Bitcoin from some bad actor getting in there and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to transfer 1,000 of these suckers to my account, right?
Yeah. I made a video of that specific scenario, just as you depicted here, with like two big red keys and two guys having to switch them on the nuclear warheads at the same time.
I mean, we have, I don't know what they are exactly, but I'm sure we have extremely good and detailed nuclear code protection to prevent an accident.
You sure about that?
Well, given our government, no, but that's the theory anyway.
Yeah, and, they haven't gone off accidentally yet. So
yeah, so far so good, right? I mean, as we're falling off the building, headed to the ground fast, but and so I would imagine you'd have to have a similar kind of thing. But however, one thing you could do is you could publish the public address and everyone could see it there, which is a damn sight better than Fort Knox, which is, the U.S. is supposed to have 8,300 tons of gold. And the fact of the matter is we haven't audited it in years and years and years. And there are a lot of us who think it's not there, that they've looted it over the years. Now, whether they have or not is undetermined, but it strikes many of us as very suspicious that they won't do an audit. And the reason for not doing an audit is they say it's too expensive, which is just, that's just patently absurd. I mean, you could audit it in,
and this is a very, very funny part of the rabbit hole, because sense value is subjective.
Yes.
What matters is not if the gold is there or not, but it is if people think it's there or not, right?
Well, that's correct. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's, and obviously, but when the dollar fails and we have hyper-Bitcoinization and the war the financial crimes trials begin, somebody might say, hey, let's get inside Fort Knox and all these other things. Let's see if that gold really is there. And they might find they're empty, and then they'll hopefully find some records and say, hey, you know what? Bill Clinton looted this thing, or somebody, whatever it might be. Right now, sadly, this will probably be after the death of a lot of the people who did it. But yeah, you're right. It is the perception. And, that goes into a lot of areas. And I think it's that shifting perception too, that changes, as the Overton window, right? That changes, how things work. I mean, look, that, my father absolutely positively believed that Lee Harvey Oswald was a single shooter who killed John F. Kennedy, right? I mean, he believed he believed the Warren Commission report as if it were God's written truth, right?
Yeah.
And I've studied it, since I was much younger and read everything there is to read. I'm absolutely, believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that the CIA and Johnson murdered Kennedy. I mean, I think there are a lot more people who feel the way I do than people who feel the way my father did.
Yes.
And it goes to, okay, there is a truth. I mean, somebody killed Kennedy. There is an absolute truth. The issue is, what is it? But over time, I guess the point is understanding can evolve, right? And so right now everyone thinks we got the golden Fort Knox, but maybe we don't. And maybe over time people become aware of that.
I happily admit that I have no clue about Mr. Oswald's motives or intentions or who paid him or like, I have no clue about that. I haven't done that deep dive yet.
Trust me, I think if you did, you'd come to the conclusion I've come to. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming for any rational analyst trying to be objective. Yeah.
Speaking of such, for lack of a better word, conspiracy theories, what do you think about the theory that the Titanic didn't hit an iceberg, but it was sunk by someone?
Oh gosh, I haven't even heard that one, so I have no way to evaluate.
In order to create the Fed.
Oh, really? Yeah, I heard there were some people on it who were anti. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just don't know. I have no evidence one way or the other to support it.
No. This is
that's an interesting theory. I mean, it's got to be provable or disprovable, based on the facts. If one were to investigate. I mean, I know they found the hull, so although I suppose an explosive could have poked the holes in the hull, I tend to believe it probably hit the iceberg.
Yeah. The thing is, one thing that I've encountered amongst Bitcoiners is that just because they have realized that what the government says is a lie, they immediately cling on to the opposite theory, and they immediately buy whatever the most popular conspiracy theory about something is. This is not about the Kennedy shooting, but just to change the subject. And I even met a guy who thought cigarettes were good for him because the government said they were bad.
Wow. Yeah. So that's going to be a hard one. I mean, there are a lot of them out there, but the one I always get a kick out of is, if you believe we put a man on the moon. I mean, there are a ton of people who think we faked the moon landings.
Yeah.
I mean, and
9/11, don't get me started.
Going there.
Yeah. There's a lot of those things. And I love the, whenever they try to prove one side or the other and they overshoot so much, someone made a very, very fancy 3D model of what the moon landing would look like with that kind of camera and that at that time and that point. And you can see the advanced computer graphics basically just doing the same thing as was filmed back then. Yeah. And it's but you haven't really proven anything, but you made this model. And this is a thing that also ties into the free lunch. And I'll explain why.
Okay.
Because people have a hard time accepting that they may not have the answer to stuff, or that there is no there is no easy answer, or there is no nuance. So what they do is they long for there to be a free lunch, and therefore they buy whatever idea makes them comfortable. So I even have a theory that every human problem, almost every human problem, stems from the wish for there to be a free lunch,
or a simple and understandable solution.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So everything from inflation. Inflation is absolutely a wish for a free lunch. We can just print more money. That's a free lunch. I would say that in my mind, I know you might disagree on this one, but I would say the afterlife is the wish for a free lunch. Oh, you'll get to have it.
Very possible. Very possible. I mean, it certainly gives mental comfort to a lot of people. And so, logical reason to believe in it, right?
Yeah, and so we're a species that long for free lunches, and probably every mammal or every living being does, because we like free food. Like there's no animal that doesn't like free food.
Correct.
But this is, I don't really know where I was going with that. There's no question or anything.
No, I think it's an interesting thing to explore. I mean, I think humans are very susceptible to being fooled. There's no doubt about that. And of course, politicians have become the master foolers, so to speak. I mean, they are
master manipulators. Yeah.
Yeah. They it attracts people who are duplicitous and they're good at being duplicitous, and they fool us. And and sometimes we want to be fooled, to be honest with you, right?
Yeah. People take what's a Franklin quotes? Any society that would give up a little security for liberty for a little temporary security
deserves neither. Yeah,
and I don't remember the entire quote, but
Freud had a similar comment where he said, that, I mean, to be realistic, I mean, most people would have to accept responsibility for their lives, and people don't want to do that.
No,
and they'd prefer to blame somebody else or rely on somebody else.
No, that's.
I mean, it actually, you can see this in Bitcoin. I mean, the whole, look, being self-sovereign, taking control of your wealth and your keys, and realizing that you have the power to destroy your wealth and nobody else does, and that if you lose those keys, you're screwed. I mean, that's a lot of people just plain don't want that responsibility. I mean, I know in my client base, mostly boomers, in the business I run, they want to have somebody they can blame. And so, if they're going to get into Bitcoin, they're going to go to Casa or Unchained and get a multi-sig solution and pay somebody to, provide them with the redundancy of the keys so that, they don't have full responsibility themselves. And I said, that's fine. I get it. Just be aware that the risk you're taking there is that if men with guns show up at Casa's headquarters or Unchained's headquarters, they're going to tell them what you got and who you are. And, I'm not suggesting that men with guns are going to do that, but, it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Exactly. It's a non-zero risk.
Yeah, right.
And, do you run a node?
I do run a node.
Oh, great.
But I confess, I full confession, I don't do much with it. There was a time when I was trying to set up some lightning channels and, and so forth. And look, I'm not that much of a techie. I know you are much more of a techie than I am.
I'm not. I'm a philosopher. Okay. I'm lazy with that stuff too.
Okay. I know you. Well, let me say this. I know you're a much better physicist than I am, because we've had that discussion, which is really fascinating. We should go there.
Oh, thank you.
But the point is that, I have not done a lot with my node, but my node is running, and I do check it from time to time. And I actually started trying to set up some lightning channels, and I confess it became technically too challenging for me. And I've got a day job that my time on. So I went back to my day job, and I'm going to leave lightning channels to the experts.
Yeah. And this is the trade-off thing again, because and this is a fascinating aspect about Bitcoin, because it's layered like that too. Like if you have a hardware wallet and you hold your own keys,
I've got that.
You've secured your Bitcoin to a 99.9% degree.
Right.
But still you're not...
Unless you're on Ledger.
Unless you're on Ledger. But you're still vulnerable to changes in the code. So that's why you need to run the node. And but it's still, for most people, a hardware wallet is plenty enough security. For most people, probably just a custodial phone wallet is enough. And you can focus you can choose to allocate your time to other stuff, like getting to know technical Bitcoiners. That's what I do. I have the best network in the world now. I can talk to really technical people at any point and have things solved for me, or at least having them walk me through the process.
I feel the same way through being in this network, going to these shows, everything else I've met. I feel like I have 10 go-to people that say, okay, what does this mean? Explain this to me. And they in-depth knowledge of it. That's extremely helpful.
It is, and it helps you helps your understanding of Bitcoin. But then again, you have to I had imposter syndrome for a long time just because I wasn't the most technical guy. But then you realize that no one grasps every aspect of this because there's so many layers to it and it's so multifaceted. Yes. So the technical side and the economical side are obvious. Like if you understand, I have a pretty good grasp of Austrian economics, especially after writing the praxeology book. So I know the economics of it. I know the technical stuff pretty well. But then you have the whole philosophical sphere and all the other stuff that comes into it, and the legal stuff. I have no clue about that, and and I have no interest in it either. So there's so much.
You can avoid it. I mean, the legal stuff is you got your 12 words, and Mola la Bay, come and take it.
Pretty much.
Luke, do you have any questions for Larry?
Yeah, Larry, I've been a big fan of your work since you came on the scene here, and
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm interested kind of in some angle because I really like how you pull together a lot of the kind of current stuff, like even the gold and all this for kind of the practical reasons to get into Bitcoin. But do you have any take on more like what do you think Bitcoin is actually going to do for people in adopting it? Because I'm curious about what you think about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think it's going to change lives in an enormous way. I mean, I think, I feel I look at young people like yourself, and I think, I look at when I was your age, the opportunities that were available to me, they were enormous because the computer was just kind of coming on the scene, PCs and stuff. And look, don't get me wrong, we still got a lot of technical innovation going forward, AI and all this exciting stuff. But I looked at the economy and everything else, and there was just a lot of upside, a lot of opportunity, and I don't see that. What I see is a decaying system where my kids who are in their 20s, they can't buy a house. I mean, they're all doing okay, they're making money, but they don't have any savings. I mean, they're just struggling to get by. It's really, really hard. I mean, I've seen statistics that show that this might be the first. In America anyway, the history has always been that each generation lives a better life economically than their parents and their grandparents and so forth. There's a progress being made. And I've seen statistics that suggest that progress might stop or has stopped in a way because of how upside down we've gotten this economy. And so when we go to a full Bitcoin standard, I think that's going to return. And I think it's going to be sad for those who don't know about this and don't get on this train and don't learn it. It's going to be really sad. But I think those who are on the train, who are learning it and understanding it and who are in this ecosystem, I think we're all going to kind of be shocked with oh my God, that was really something. I'll just give you an example. In my lifetime, I remember when Microsoft came public in 1984, I think it was. I bought the stock. It was trading at like 13 times earnings and growing at 35% a year. And they had the IBM contract. They were running MS-DOS on every single PC. And I remember my boss saying, these PCs, what the hell are they good for? It's just kind of it's a glorified typewriter with a word processor on it. And I was kind of like, shit, man. They're going to do a lot of stuff here on the spreadsheet's going to, and that was before spreadsheet, anything. And, you could just kind of see, and, I saw Bill Gates at conferences and he was just a smart techie and he had this nice little software business. Well, look at him today, look at Microsoft today. And, I'm not suggesting that Bitcoin's the same growth trajectory, but, all the money in the world, all the Bitcoins in the world, we are really, really, really in early days. So I think people are going to be shocked. I think our grandkids are going to be like, holy crap, you have a whole coin. You have one whole, what are you talking about? One whole coin could be significant wealth. In today's
Manhattan.
What's that?
Manhattan.
Well, I don't know if it's Manhattan, but yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be a really, really, really big deal, in my opinion, if it plays out the way it would appear it's programmed to play out. I think it's going to melt minds. I really do. Now, Could I be wrong? Sure. Could it take longer? Yeah, probably. Maybe it will take longer, but it could also be shorter. I mean, we just don't know. And, the history says that once, it's this, tipping point argument that Malcolm Gladwell makes, once you kind of get to 10% on board, then it rapidly takes the same number of years to go to, to 90% adoption. And this is an innovation. It's clearly a monetary innovation that's important. Just look at the performance, look at the Sharpe ratio, look at everything that you do to measure it. And I don't know if we're at 10% yet. We may not have gotten there. So, okay, fine. So maybe we hit 10% in the next few years. That's 16 years in. So then add 16 years to that, where 90% of the world has it. So, we're talking about, in the late 2030s, living on a full Bitcoin standard. And, maybe in terms of purchasing power, maybe a Satoshi is, or maybe 10 Satoshis is $1, and any coin is 100 million Satoshis. I mean, shit, that's a lot of purchasing power. Right?
Yeah. And it's inevitable. If Bitcoin continues to work, that is inevitable.
That's the thing. I look at it and I keep trying to poke a hole in the thesis.
Yeah.
I can't find it unless there's a technical EMP blow up. Having said that, though, let me just say the one other caution: the governments could get really, really aggressive about it, and there could be a real war, and there could be a real setback. Let me just give you an example. You're in government, you realize that this thing is ruining your fiat currency, gold too, and you decide, what, we're going to make it illegal for Americans. I don't think this will happen, but it could. We're going to make it illegal for Americans to hold Bitcoin. If you're caught holding Bitcoin, you're going to spend 10 years in prison. If you sell Bitcoin now, we're going to tax you at 90%, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's likely that kind of a law gets passed, but I don't think it's impossible. And they coordinate with other major G7 countries to kind of do something similar. And so everybody who's into this becomes an outlaw. What I mean?
It's the vulgarity of that, though, because banning so-called unhosted wallets is banning 12 words. That would mean you couldn't utter 12 words in a certain, so it's the most ridiculous thing ever done to the First Amendment ever.
I completely agree, but consider how bad and threatened the people on the other side of the equation are.
Well, they're not though, because I view it as, when the Soviet Union fell, it was either Gorbachev or Yeltsin. I don't remember which one. He was over in the US. Yes. And he went into a supermarket in some one-horse town in Oklahoma or somewhere. And there's more food there than he has ever seen in his entire life. And he's in the elite in the Soviet Union.
Correct.
So, and I picture US government officials sitting in their ivory towers going to visit El Salvador at some point. And they'll see how much better life is on the other side, and they'll realize what they're doing is bullshit, even for them. Very possibly. Yeah.
Very possibly. And look, even if my worst case scenario does play out, everyone will go underground. Everyone will keep their 12 words. I mean, I'll become an Italian citizen or something. I mean, a lot of people will leave the country. I mean, we'll wait it out, because I don't think it can survive over a longer period of time. But I do think that, I just want to give kind of the heads up, because, the people who run the government, the people who run the system, the people who have the fiat money and who have the power are threatened by this. And they do, I think the smarter ones do realize what an existential threat it represents. And, whether they go to the full extent that I just described or not, it's hard, they probably don't, but, they are going to throw sand in our eyes. They're going to try to mess this up, slow down the adoption, maintain the world they live in. I mean, we all know the laws in Britain in the 1850s when, the road locomotives came along, and you had to walk in front of it with a red flag, and you had to have a locomotive guy sitting in the right seat. I mean, the people in privilege don't like this shit.
But the effort it would take to stop it, though, because for instance, there's a very lovely Australian woman who bought all 3 of my books in Miami, but she couldn't pay me. I just told her to, don't worry about it. Just value for value. Somehow do whatever you want at whatever point you want. She comes back to Australia. I come back to Europe. and she asked me, "Can you shoot me a QR code?" I shoot her a QR code. Beep, the money is there. Like, so we did the trade on one continent, and she instantly teleported them from Australia to a third continent.
Right.
Like, and we do this because we can do it because we have social media, and we have, like, phone calls used to be expensive. So they're going to have to rewind the clock to back where a phone call costed $4 per minute. Like,
Right.
like
No. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, they are losing all of their levers of power.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it used to be the New York Times said it and it was God's word. I mean, now, Judith Miller lying about the Iraq war, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, New York Times is a joke,
Yeah. That article about Bitcoin mining, for instance.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah.
It was just horrible. But again, social media picks up on it. I mean, look, in the rugged to and fro of ideas, social media sorts shit out pretty damn fast.
It does. This is an example I do often. I saw when the Ukraine war started, there was someone fleeing either the Ukraine or Russia, I don't remember which country, with a portfolio, like a leather portfolio, physical portfolio full of a gold bar, a bunch of rubles, a bunch of euros, and a bunch of dollars, like in big piles. So it was his life savings, basically. Yeah. And of course, customs took it away from him. And the interesting thing is all the comments below the picture, because every Bitcoiner is like, ha, look at this idiot who can't remember 12 words.
Sure.
So that information goes out to every other person thinking of fleeing their country who has Twitter. Everyone sees that. So even if the learning curve isn't that steep, it's probably steep enough, like for humanity. When we have,
absolutely.
Yeah. It's because
that was one of the great original use cases, was the Chinese were using, wealthy Chinese were using it to send Bitcoin to Vancouver and then taking it out through a Canadian exchange and buying, Canadian real estate. Yeah. Vancouver real estate. I mean, the expatriate escape is a great use case.
It is.
How do you, I mean, I can't leave this country with $10 million worth of gold. I can't do it.
No.
I mean, unless I get in a private boat, and go overseas, I just can't do it. But I could leave with $100 million of Bitcoin and not a soul would know,
Exactly. And even at your age, it wouldn't be too hard to memorize 12 words.
No, well, I don't know. The 12 words, I mean, I don't think I'll ever just rely on my memory only. I have multiple copies written down and stuffed in safe places. But because I mean, if I go senile, I want my relatives to know how to get a hold of, the coins.
Not saying that you're old or anything.
No. That's okay. I don't see it personally. I'm about to turn 66, so I'm a young 66. So there we go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The show is also sponsored by BitcoinBook.shop, the Bitcoin-only bookstore by Consensus Network. Consensus specializes in translations of Bitcoin books and also publishes original titles in English and many other languages. Check out BitcoinBook.shop for all your Bitcoin book needs. Consensus is always looking for new contributors, whether you have a book you want to publish, you want to help translate books into your native language, or you have some other way you want to get involved. So if you want to help spread the Bitcoin message, reach out to Consensus Network by Twitter or email. Details are in the show notes.
Okay, Luke, do you have another question for Larry?
Honestly, I think we might as well end on a good note. Like honestly, no point
before I start offending Larry.
No, don't worry, even for me at all. I've got very thick skin, and trust me, I get a lot more green on Twitter. Right? And as you guys know my persona on Twitter. I mean, somebody will hopefully do a meme for me, right? And the meme will be angry old man yells at central bankers. I mean, I try to be the best kind of Jeff Booth imitation possible, because I think he's so wonderful and positive and full of love and just about how it's all going to get better. And I agree with all of that. I'm just very frustrated by the system as is, and these people, who are defending their privilege, the central bankers, and they're just blatantly lying to people and causing a great deal of pain in the process. And part of my role, I guess, as an old fart is I'm not going to sit around and take it. You know what I mean?
No, that's fantastic.
I'm going to yell back.
Yeah. And you do a great job with that. Larry,
Well,
this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. So glad to see you.
likewise, really great to see you. I hope we get to see one another in Madeira. I know you've been doing a lot of shows. Let me just put in a plug if I can. The Pacific Bitcoin show is really a fabulous show. The one run by Swan.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of time zones for you, but so I compare that to Miami.
Yeah.
It's as good as Miami or better. It's really pure Bitcoin signal. There's no shitcoinery there.
Higher signal to noise ratio.
It's fabulous. And great attendees, the whole 9 yards. So I think it's in October. I don't know. You can Google it, find it easily. I think it's October. You should think about coming over if you can. All of us will be there. So.
I am thinking about coming over to that one, and we'll see. Everything has a price.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, reach out to Corey. I mean, my suspicion is, I'm sure he'd love to have you speaking tribute. So,
maybe I should do that. I mean, I haven't been to that side of the U.S. yet. I've been to the East Coast.
You could make if bring the wife and family. I mean, California, it's a shit. I wouldn't want to live there. It's kind of turned into a shithole. But in terms of natural beauty, hiking mountains, beaches, the ocean, it's a beautiful place. It really is.
Yeah, I took the what's it called, the Highway 1, the one at the coast.
Down the coast.
I drove that down the Bahia, California, in California, in Mexico. So I've seen the Mexican part of it, but not. Well,
it's gorgeous from San Diego all the way up to Oregon too. So
yeah. I've heard about it, and I'd really like to see that one day. So who knows? If not this year, so maybe next year.
Okay.
But hopefully I can make it. And thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
See you soon again.
See you again. And, stay in touch because we don't talk often enough.
No.
Well, you're welcome. Agree. You're welcome on regularly if you like.
Okay. Just reach out. Happy to do it.
Absolutely.
Guys, anywhere else you'd like to send our viewers and listeners? How can they get in touch?
Anywhere else? No, I mean, if people want to follow what I'm up to, like I say, I'm a loudmouth on Twitter. It's just my name, Lawrence Lepard. So, and I'm open for DMs. I don't know. I can't always respond instantly, but I try to be attentive to that, help people. Okay.
That's awesome.
All
thanks
right.
so much for coming
guys. Very nice to see you. Take care. See you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye. See you, Larry.
What did you think about that episode with Lawrence Lepard? He's got some great thoughts about the effects that Bitcoin will have on the world, especially if we see hyperbitcoinization within the next decade. It's always great to talk to Larry, and maybe we'll see him on Madeira sometime soon. Let us know what you thought about the episode. You can send us a boostergram on Fountain, leave us a comment on YouTube, or get in touch on Nostr or Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the episode and subscribe to the Consensus Network channel. Our show sponsors are Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, and BitcoinBook.shop. Use code FOOTPRINT at BitcoinBook.shop for 10% off your purchase. That's all for now. See you next time, and thanks for listening.